Before we begin, viewer discretion is strongly advised. The following is for educational and entertainment purposes only. This is the verbatim federal courtroom testimony of the Sean Diddy Combs trial as reported by reliable sources. What drove Keanu Reeves, one of Hollywood's most private and respected actors, to break his legendary silence? What bizarre request from Sean Diddy Combs caused Keanu to immediately ties with the music mogul and potentially report his concerns to authorities? And why is this testimony being called the final nail in the coffin for Diddy's defense in a stunning development that has left the entertainment industry reeling? Keanu Reeves, known for his intensely private nature and careful selection of associations, has taken the witness stand in the ongoing federal case against Sean Diddy Combs. For decades, Reeves has maintained a reputation as one of Hollywood's most genuine, humble, and ethical figures, carefully avoiding the industry's dark and notorious personalities. Hadn't appear as a publicity seeker, hadn't come forward as someone with aggregate. Reeves arrived as a reluctant witness who could no longer remain silent about a disturbing Senate crossed professional and personal boundaries in ways that left him deeply concerned about the welfare of others. I've spent my career trying to focus on work and maintain privacy. Revastated, his typically calm demeanor noticeably strained, but there are moments when silence becomes untenable, when what you've witnessed suggests patterns that could harm vulnerable people. The decision to testify wasn't made impulsively, according to source close to the actor. Reeves consulted with his longtime advisors and legal team, agreeing to provide testimonial about an encounter that occurred several years ago, an encounter that he described as profoundly disturbing and unlike anything I've experienced in my 30-plus years in the entertainment industry. I fear finding this information valuable. Payless. Take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel for more breaking developments in this ongoing case. The federal courtroom fell into complete silence as Keanu Reeves was worn, and the overhead lights seemed to intensify, illuminating the actor's somber expression and the visibly discomfort he felt being in the deciders on both sides straightened in their chairs, while Diddy, seated at the defense table, maintained a carefully controlled expression that betrayed no emotion. Nobody expected Keanu Reeves to voluntarily testify. The room was tense as focused on the witness stand, and Reeves settled into his seat, his usually relaxed posture now rigid with evident tension. Gasps echoed through the gallery. Evan, the judge, seemed momentarily taken aback by the gravity that Reeves brought to the proceedings. No announcement, not a written statement, just Keanu Reeves preparing to speak about something Heckerly wished he never had to address. Until that moment, Reeves had maintained his characteristic distance from Hollywood controversies and scandals, but something had changed. Maybe it was the mounting testimony from other witnesses. Maybe it was seeing the patterns of alleged behavior that his own experience. Maybe it was recognizing that his silence might enable further harm. Whatever it was, Keanu Reeves was done keeping this particular encounter to himself. Hewitt, taking the stand as a celebrity, was there as a witness to be he found deeply troubling from a powerful industry figure, and when he began to speak, the courtroom wasn't prepared for the contrast between Reeves' typically understated manner and the disturbing nature of what he described Becky's. What Keanu Reeves revealed about this interaction with Diddy, the unusual request, and the context surrounding it isn't just strange. It was part of what prosecutors were establishing as a pattern of controlling manipulative behavior that extended across Diddy's and personal relationships. It started like any other day of the trial. The room buzzed with low conversations. The press hunched in their designated rows, and lawyers whispered strategies as they waited for what was listed on the docket as number 7. But when the Bathe announced Keanu Reeves, the room changed. You could hear a pin drop. Some people thought it was a mistake. Others thought it was a case of mistaken identity. But Keanu walked deliberately to Theston, his expression grave but resolute. Everyone, this was real. The judge raised an eyebrow, and Diddy, who'd been reviewing documents with his legal team, suddenly looked up, his confident demeanor faltering for just a moment before he regained his composure. Kane took the oath. No eye contact with defense table. He didn't even glance in Diddy's direction. I understand this testimony may seem unexpected, Keanu began. I've always valued privacy, Bothman and others, but there are rare occasions when remaining silent serves no one. The judge allowed him to continue, and from that moment on the entire trial asterisk shifted, because what Keanu was about to say wasn't part of any media narrative. It wasn't a social media rumor. It was a meeting that had clearly weighed on conscience. The prosecutor approached, addressed Beckley. Mr. Reeves, could you please tell the court about your professional affiliations with the defendant? Keanu nodded, his characteristic thoughtfulness evident in his measured response. I've known Mr. Combs peripherally for years through industry events. We've never worked together directly. In 2018, we both attended a charity event in Los Angeles. It was there that he approached him about potentially collaborating on a film project his company was developing. And did this professional discussion continue beyond that event? That prosecutor asked. Yes, Keanu replied. At Merkel's invitation, I agreed to meet at his Los Angeles residence to discuss that project further. I was told other creative partners would be present. When I arrived, I discovered it was just Mercombs and several members of High's household staff. The prosecutor nodded. And what happened during this meeting? Reeves Keanu took a deep breath, visibly uncomfortable with the public nature of his testimony, but committed to providing it accurately. The meeting began normally enough with discussions about the project, but quickly shifted to what Mercombs called a test of loyalty and connection that he claimed was necessary for working together. I've been in this industry for decades, he said. I've had unusual meetings. I've encountered district personalities. I've been a scato, participate in unconventional prex, but nothing prepared me for what happened. That afternoon, he turned slightly toward the jury, his discomfort evident, but his resolve clear. What began a standard creative meeting became something entirely different. Keanu told the courtroom that it started like many Hollywood meetings do, with informal conversation and networking. It came through seemingly legitimate business channels. The way they framed it was sought to be about a film, project, coming music and action. General standard entertainment, industry collaboration. I'd been approached at base. They wanted to elevate that project, so I didn't question the invitation, but the moment Keanu Diddy's residence, he knew something was off. The estate had unusually tight security protocols. All electronic devices were collected upon entry. Theblins were drawn despite it buying me day the second. I asked about the other creative partners who were to attend. There was a vague explanation about scheduling conflicts. That should have been the first red flag. The said it was for privacy reasons. No, to protect the creative energy. Beauty felt like something else, like an environment designed for control, reearth and collaboration. He was led through a series of increasingly private areas off-tone. The atmosphere became increasingly tense. There were staff members who seemed to be monitoring rather than assisting. It felt like everyone was following a script except for him. Keanu said that after about 30 minutes of superficial discussion, a booth project, Diddy's demeanor shifted dramatically. He dismissed his staff with a hand gesture, and once we were alone, he said something like, the real test of whether someone belongs in my inner circle isn't about talent, it's about trust and submission to a vision. The courtroom remained silent as Keanu continued. He then led me to an adjacent room where there was a large bath filled with water. He explained that this was water he had recently bathed in and that very on in his true circle participate in what he called a purification ritual that demonstrated their willingness to become one with his essence. Keanu paused, his discomfort evident. Mr. Combs told them that bathing in his used water was a demonstration of loyalty and belief in his superior energy. He explained that many successful people in the industry had participated in this ritual and that it was part of why they had a COVID-6. He continued recounting Diddy's exact words. This water contains my energy, my success, my power. By immersing in it, you're showing you understand hierarchy and are willing to absorb what I've already blessed. A variant who's truly successful in my circle has done this. It's how I know Horley believes. Keanu described his reaction. I declined immediately and clearly. I stated that I wasn't comfortable with the request and that I preferred to keep our relationship strictly professional. Mr. Combs initially seemed amused by my refusal, as if he expected it, but was confident heckled overcome my objections. The most revelation came when Keanu described what happened next. When I moved toward the door indicating I was ready to leave, Mr. Combs' demeanor changed completely. He said, "You don't understand how this works. Nobody walks away from an opportunity one offer. Ask anyone in the industry about the consequences of disrespecting me." The threat wasn't explicit, but the implication was unmistakable. Said he followed Diddy back to the main room, hoping to de-escalate the situation and leave without further incident. Instead, what he witnessed disturbed him even more. There were displayed showing various celebrities in strange, seeming realistic scenarios. Some involved situations, some appeared to be taken without these objects' awareness. There were others that Diddy described as his insurance policy against disloyalty. Paused, maintaining his composure through a visible effort. I didn't fully understand what I was seeing, and that was unnerving in itself. Keanu continued, his voice steady but clearly affected by the memory after. I refused his request and prepared to leave. Diddy became increasingly insistent, saying things like, "You don't understand the opportunity you're rejecting, and there's a reason. I've maintained my position in this industry for decades." He thought the situation couldn't become more unsettling until Diddy made a phone call. In his presence, it was on speaker. The person who answered addressed Diddy with unusual difference. I almost didn't press as what I was hearing, but the was clearly about someone Yuho had made the wrong choice. Recent Diddy said something like, "Make sure the situation is handled the same way as last time. Complete removal, complete." There was no explicit mention of what was being handled, but that context felt threatening. Keanu testified that the implied threat made him racist. His understanding of industry power dynamics. I've been fortunate to have significant autonomy in my career. Thought conversation made me realize that authors might be navigating much more controlled and potentially coercive relationships in their final interaction. Board. Keanu left the residence. Diddy's manner shifted again, becoming so perfectly friendly, but with an underly intention. He said something like, "I respect your choice today, but remember that in this business, doors that Stay closed. Think about what side of the door you want to be on. This statement was delivered with a smile, but there was nothing genuinely warm. A booty. He said that's when the subtle pressure campaign began. I'd get calls from various industry figures asking about my issue with Diddy. I maintained profession's boundaries. Then suddenly there were rumors circulating about me being difficult on set, about having unreasonable demands, about being guntial with colleagues. I knew what it was a coordinated effort. Diddy didn't need to contact me directly, he had a network that could apply pressure, and so for years Keanu said nothing publicly. He continued his work, maintained his professionalism, focused in projects with collaborators heterosted. But when I saw reports about others who had been placed in uncomfortable positions, who had been asked to participate in unusual rituals tests of loyalty, I recognized the pattern from my own experience. He looked around the courtroom. He wasn't just building a business empire, he was creating an environment where compliance was expected, and questioning was punished, and that Keanu said was what finally brought me to court. Keanu Pausa glanced at the jury and leaned closer. Tough Mike, it wasn't just the strange request, that was just the most visible part, he said. From that moment forward, Hannah test subtle but meaningful changes in how certain projects were developed, how some collaborations suddenly fell through, how specific opportunities to steer. He explained that messages would come through various channels, reminders that the industry is smaller than you think and that bridges burn it affect everyone around you, and he maintained his distance from Diddy's projects and associates. Things would shift behind the scenes. I declined involvement in something connected to Mercombs on Monday, and by Thursday I'd learned that an unrelated project had suddenly lost funding. He said this didn't happen once or twice, it became a recognizable pattern. He didn't need to make explicit threats, he had a system that did it for him. His influence into studios, production companies, financing, he knew who to call, who knew how to create obstacles. They'd appeared coincidental, but followed a clear pattern of consequence for those who didn't align with his expectations. Keanu's voice remained steady, but took in a deeper intensity. I stayed silent about this experience for years. I convinced myself it was an isolated incident, perhaps exaggerated in my perception, but then the allegations from others began to surface. He said the first time he heard similar accounts from other witnesses, he was struck by the parallels. Then I received a call from the prosecution team, not a summons but an inquiry. They said, Mr. Riva, several witnesses have described with expertise with ritual requests involving water. We understand you may have information relevant to establishing a pattern of behavior. He described feeling a profound sense of responsibility. I didn't know my experience would be relevant to a larger case, but once I understood that others had been placed in similar or more extreme situations, everything connected. Keanu said he spent several days in deep reflection before agreeing to testify. Unusual requests, the implied threats, subsequent industry pressure. It was clear that what I experienced wasn't an isolated incident or an eccentric moment, that was part of a methodology. He said the breaking point wasn't fear, it was cynical obligation. I realized that if I remained silent while others were coming for it at great personal risk, I would be complicit in allowing this behavior to continue. My position in the industry, me a certain protection that others might not have. With that protection comes responsibility, he told court. He responded to the prosecution's inquiry after careful consideration, and I told them, I have direct experience with behavior that appears too much the pattern you're investigating. Him willing to testify to what I witnessed firsthand. He looked at Thedry. I wasn't just someone who declined an unusual request, I was a witness. Tohat appears to be a systematic approach to establishing control and dominance in professional relationships. Then he looked briefly toward the defense table. His expression, not angry but resolute in the pattern of behavior described by other witnesses, is consistent with what I experienced personally. For his final statement, the judge allowed Keanu to contextualize his testimony. He remained seated. His characteristic.com partial arrested. This isn't about one unusual request, he began. You've built a career in creating the appearance of legitimate baseness and creative opportunities. That letter revealed different expectations. You called it a ritual. You called it a test of loyalty. You called it an opportunity. But what I observed was an attempt to establish dominance and control. The defense team whispered urgently to each other. Diddy maintained his composed expression, though his eyes never met Keanu. I witnessed how quickly professional opportunity could transform into something unsettling, experienced the subtle ways influence that can be wielded to pressure compliance. I observed how rejection of unusual demands led to coordinated consequences, created systems where people felt they couldn't say no without risking their livelihood. Shin Keanu referenced his long career in the entertainment industry. I've been fortunate to work with hundreds of creative professionals over decades. What I experienced in your home wasn't eccentric creativity or unusual networking, it was something fundamentally different. Keanu addressed that jury directly. If you think this is just about an uncomfortable meeting or only strange request, you're missing the larger context. This appears to be part of a methodology designed to identify who could be controlled and who would resist, and those systems rely on most people choosing silence over the professional risk of speaking out. Then Hoare returned his attention to the court. The request to bathe and use water wasn't about purification from what I've now heard from other witnesses. It appears to have been a bootstablishing a psychological dynamic where unusual compliance. Beckham normalized finished his testimony and sat calmly awaiting any further questions. And Diddy, he maintained his composed expression, but the confident demeanor that had characterized his court appearance seemed diminished because testimony from some man with Keanu Reeves' reputation and credibility wasn't something his defense had anticipated. When Keanu completed his testimony, he didn't look triumphant. He looked like someone who had performed a difficult but necessary civic duty. The courtroom remained tense, processing the implications of his statements from such a credible source. Even the judge appeared to be weighing the testimony with particular care. Some of the jurors were visibly affected by the account, and the defense team was already in hurry at consultation about how to approach cross-examination. Keanu didn't engage with the press. When he exited, he didn't make statements, didn't acknowledge the cameras. He walked out of the courthouse with the same dignified reserve that has characterized his public persona throughout his career. When asked Latterby reporters if he worried about professional consequences, he reportedly spent some matters transcend profession considerations. This was own at them, but outside the courtroom, Hollywood was only beginning to process the implications. Studio executives held emergency meetings, public relations teams drafted contingency statements, and industry figures with known connections to Diddy began issuing carefully worded statements expressing shock and reevaluation of their relationships. Been closed-doors crisis. Management teams were activated. Publicists advised clients to distance themselves from Thaxaste, and while many industry insiders attempted to project surprise, social media was already connecting dots between past rumors and current testimony. Old interviews where Diddy discussed his loyalty tests were buying examined red carpet interactions. Sure, certain celebrities seemed uncomfortable in his presence, gained new context, and most significantly, the industry's long-standing whisper networks about unusual rituals among certain power players were gaining public visibility. The public wasn't just shocked by the allegations. They were particularly moved by the fact that some man with Keanu Reeves' well-established integrity and reluctancy to engage in industry politics had felt compelled to come forward. That Thenermally private actor had chosen to speak publicly about such a bizarre encounter lent extraordinary credibility to the accounts of less establishedness. The era of unconditional power for industry titans was facing a serious challenge, and as this case continues to develop, we'll bring you the most accurate updates available. If you found this report informative, please like and subscribe to our channel, because whenever the most private and in Hollywood feel compelled to speak out, we all need to pay attention what they're saying.